First of all, here is an example of a professional performing one repetition. The clean involves moving the barbell from the ground to the shoulders with an emphasis on speed and hip and leg drive. The clean is a discrete skill as it has a clear beginning and end point, although in saying this, it can be argued that it is actually several serial skills stacked end to end, as you will see when we break down the components. It is also considered a closed skill, as it is not affected by the environment and is initiated only by the performer. Given the large muscle groups involved, the clean is considered a gross movement skill. It is also quite complex, as a lot of practice is needed for the learner to learn how to process and perform the clean with continuity and not in a disjointed fashion. Finally, it is considered a lower organizational skill, as the parts of the clean can be broken down and performed separately. We place the clean on Gentile's taxonomy scale as a 4. The reason for this is there is a lot of body transport in a vertical direction, but also manipulation of an object. There are only 3 major regulatory conditions: the barbell and the weight, the gym, and whether or not you have a lifting platform. Inter-trial variability is very low and really only changes with the weight. We are keeping it low for the moment at only 25 kilograms. In the deadlift, the bar starts on the floor and the learner grips it and initiates the lift with appropriate knee, hip and back angles and straight arms, and the bar close to the shins. The deadlift is then initiated. Once the bar is past the knees, it is accelerated past the hips using triple extension of the knees, hips and ankles. This makes up the high pull component of the skill. The bar is then caught on the shoulders in a front squat position. Once the bar is stable, the learner stands up tall to complete the lift. The first is continuity of movement. This is subjective, but refers to fluid transitions between each discrete component. For example, deadlift to a high pull to a squat. Second is speed. Not necessarily as fast as possible, but we need to find the optimal speed at different phases that generates maximal power but does not interfere with technique. Thirdly, we have triple extension of the ankle, knee and hip. This ensures that the leg musculature is generating as much power as possible. Finally, we have straight back. This is an essential safety cue, as this makes it less likely to sprain spinal structures and muscles. Weight is also a consideration in performance. It can affect all of the above, but is usually not so important in the learning phase. These 4 measures of performance will be used in our testing protocol to give the learner a mark out of 4 for each repetition in their trial. Our testing protocol for the pre, post, retention and transfer tests is as follows. The bar is loaded, or the ball in the retention test, with the weight. 1 full clean rep is performed every 20 seconds for 10 trials. Each rep will be scored out of 4 using our measurements for performance. A total score out of 40 will be used for comparison against other tests. For the transfer test, the same protocol will be used, although instead of using a barbell, a dead ball will instead be used. The same movement will be performed, but the learner will have to adapt to the different shape of the dead ball compared to the barbell. This will be performed on the last day of the 4-week practicing program, and will be used as a way to determine if the learner is able to perform and adapt to different shapes. It is expected that after each week the learner will be able to connect each component learnt thus far, eventually being able to progress to performing a full clean. We use the power clean as a simplified version of the skill. This is good for novices, as it involves less body movement and fewer complicated moving parts. This program has been designed for a novice who is in the cognitive stage of learning. It is unlikely that in 4 weeks they will be moved on to the associative stage, as this is a novel and complex skill that requires constant practice to improve. Our practice schedule begins exclusively with part practice, teaching the individual each component of the skill in the first week and then adding whole practice to prepare for the tests. Each session begins with a 5-minute warm-up, and then the participant will be asked to perform 5 reps of the previous session's movement from memory as part of their warm-up. Over the next 45 minutes, 1 to 3 movements will be practiced in sets of no more than 5 reps with at least a minute of rest in between sets. It is expected that after each week the learner will be able to connect each component learnt thus far, eventually being able to progress to performing a full clean. Research has shown that distributed practice is better than block practice for practicing discrete tasks. The participant will always have a coach or teacher demonstrating the skill before they perform it. They will also name the main parts of the skill using the verbal cues. These demos will be given at the introduction of each new part of a skill, and again whenever the learner feels they need an extra demonstration. The demonstrations will be given by someone who is able to perform the skill correctly, as the learner picks up specific movement patterns visually. Our strategy is to use the 4 main measures of performance listed before to quantitatively and qualitatively measure the execution of the clean. The performance will be marked out of 4, giving the learner a total score out of 40, and then we can give them a quantitative measure of performance to compare across tests. Feedback will be given if the performance of the skill receives a score of 2 or under. This is known as bandwidth feedback. As the learner gets better, there will be less feedback given, as they will be most likely receiving a score greater than 2 as they get better. Research has found that reduced frequency of knowledge of results, or faded feedback, enhances motor skill learning. This strategy allows for the learner to gain both knowledge of results through the quantitative measure, but also knowledge of performance, as it will give them an idea about which movement patterns are being executed correctly and which need improvement. Through the use of measure of performance, using the marking rubric, the feedback will be given after the performance of the skill, and this is known as terminal feedback. Each session will have a particular goal put in place. For example, in the first session, the goal will be to learn how to execute the deadlift component. There are also weekly goals that are put in place to ensure that those parts of the skill have been learned and the learner will be able to progress forwards into slightly more complex skills. We want the attention of our learner to be on being able to perform each part of the clean using correct technique. Cues will be used in order to assist them focusing on these key aspects. Several verbal cues will be used for each of our exercises. These cues will assist in breaking down the skill into the important components and will hopefully stop them from feeling overwhelmed due to the simplicity of these cues. For the deadlift, we will tell the participant to use their hips as a hinge, keep the bar close to their shins, and to bring their hips forward once the bar has cleared their knees. For the high pull, we want them to focus on extending their body and trying to touch their ears using their shoulders. For the front squat, we would tell them to keep their elbows high and their knees out.